informed scholars here. Professor Pramod Kumar is the current director of the Giri Institute of Development Studies. He has also been director and professor of Agricultural Development and Rural Transformation Center. Dr. Santosh Mehrotra is currently professor of economics, Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies, JNU, but he has also served as DG of the Institute of Applied Manpower Research. Mr. Professor Alok Ranjan has been Chief Secretary of Uttar Pradesh and has headed many diverse departments in Uttar Pradesh, so a wealth of practical experience. And fourth, Shri Ranjan Dwivedi is a member of the National Advisory Committee of the National Disaster Management Authority. He has been Director General of Police for Government of Uttar Pradesh and also is currently the member of the Governing Board of the Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU. So a wealth of academic and pragmatic experience. Before I call on the first speaker, I'll go in the order in which we had given these names. Before I do that, I just want to say that one thing, and looking at the ranking of UP in per capita GDP terms, I just had a quick look yesterday, and basically we have Bihar at the bottom in per capita NSDP terms, and UP as second from the bottom. And this position has not changed much over the last 10 or more years. So I think given that UP is the largest state, I think it's very important to have this discussion and have the views of such well-informed and eminent people on what needs to be done in UP to raise the per capita GDP of the state relative to the others. With that, let's start with Professor Pramod Kumar. I should add that, if we take kind of 15 to 20 minutes, if we take 15 minutes, that will be 1 hour. We take 20, it will take up most of the time. So please try to keep to that. And perhaps one way to do it is kind of not to repeat the data too much. Of course, one can emphasize, that which data you may think is important, etc. But with that, with that kind of request, over to you, Professor.
Okay. I would like.
Yeah, I can see it. You may want to start the slideshow. That will make it bigger.
Slideshow. Visible slideshow?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see the slide, but also the whole thing on the side. If you're having difficulty, we can start. That's fine. We can see the slide, but if you start the slideshow, generally that comes on the whole. But that's okay. We can go with the way, whatever works for you. That's fine. We can see now your entire screen, but if that's the way it is, that's fine too. Let's start.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind Virmani, for nice introduction and
Mute करने के लिए बोल दी किसी ने
यही तो
Dr. Pramod, I think you have gone on mute. Yeah.
ये क्या हुआ?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So, well, without wasting time, I'll be speaking on income variations in agriculture across various agroclimatic zones, findings from large household survey in Uttar Pradesh.
So, excuse me, Sajjad, can I just make a request?
Yeah. So I'll be just speak about a survey.
Professor Pramod Kumar, just one sec. I think there's a bandwidth issue. So if all of us not speaking can hide our videos and go mute, probably we'll be able to hear much better.
Yeah, that's it.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
So I'll be just presenting. There is a double voice.
What is studio?
Some problem in the. I don't know. The expert is trying to is it okay now? So I'll present the main features of the primary survey conducted at the year 2018-19. It was 14,169 rural household surveys for measurement of farmers. So I'll just speak briefly about sampling procedure followed, and then the estimates of farm income across 9 agroclimatic zones, productivity, cost, and returns for the farmers, and then conclusion and procedure. Now, if we see, I'll just skip some of these background I had prepared, like how much is the geographical area and number of districts in Uttar Pradesh. If we see the distribution of income in Uttar Pradesh, primary sector contributes around 20, in the gross value added 24%, secondary sector contributes 26%, and tertiary sector contributes around 50%, which is slightly less than the picture we see all India given on the right hand side. In terms of GSDP of Uttar Pradesh per capita at constant prices, in Uttar Pradesh, GSDP is 40,000 compared to 99,694 at the all India. So the ratio is almost 40%. So UP per capita income is even less than half compared to all India. So this gives the standing of Uttar Pradesh at a much lower level. And if we see last 7 years as GDP growth rate from 12 to 2019, which were the normal years, Uttar Pradesh grew at 5.8% per annum, whereas all India is 6.64. So average growth rate is also less than all India for the last 6 to 7 years average. We see capital outlay as a percentage of GSDP, which is a positive factor. It is higher compared to all India, but its spending on social sector is less than all India. These three graphs show per capita government expenditure in Uttar Pradesh is less than compared to all India. Similarly, per capita health expenditure only 887 compared to 1496 all India, and per capita education expenditure only 2,286 compared to 4,000 all India. So UP, I think, needs to pick up social sector spending. And now I'll direct move to the objective of the study, which was conducted as I described. 14,000, more than 14,000 households were surveyed. The primary objective of the study was to estimate farmers' income for agriculture year July to June from 15-16 to 22-23. It was to be a multiple rounds, but we had conducted first survey and second round. We are still preparing for getting the funds from the state and resuming these survey. So the survey results for the agriculture year July 2017 to June 2018, I will be presenting here. So this is the agroclimatic region of Uttar Pradesh. If we see, Uttar Pradesh is divided into 9 agroclimatic regions. Trai region is the valley of Himalayas, and then Western Plain is this region. Central Plain is in the middle, and semi-arid Southwestern Plain is the purple shown here. Then Central Plain is in the middle, Bundelkhand in the south, and Northeast Plain and Eastern Plain, and then the Vindhyan area, Vindhyan region. So these are the 9 agroclimatic zones in which UP is divided. Now I'll not talk of all the districts in different agroclimatic zones. There's different number of districts. In some zones, there's more number of districts. Some zones have less number of districts. But we had sampled all the 75 districts in the given zone. 2 blocks from each districts were randomly selected at second stage, and from then blocks, we had divided the blocks into different number of villages. The blocks having more than 200 villages, blocks having 150 to 200 villages, 100 to 150 villages, and less than 100 villages. So we selected 5 villages from the blocks which had more than 200 villages, 4 villages in the 150 to 200 block, and the block which had 100 to 150 villages, we selected 3 villages, and less than 100 block, 2 villages were selected. So in this way, total 150 blocks were selected, with 14 in the first category, 24 in the second, 54 in the third, and 58 in the fourth category. And from these number of villages and blocks, it makes total 444 villages, 70 in the first, 96 in the second, 162 and 116 in the third and fourth. And 30 households from each village were selected. After selecting the blocks, we had the village selection, and from the 444 villages with 30 households from each village, 13,000 households were to be selected. So actual sample consists of 14,169 households who were surveyed separately for Kharif and Rabi 2 seasons. So I'll be just briefly presenting the results of these households which were surveyed. All 75 districts were represented. 150 blocks were taken from these 75, and 444 villages were surveyed. 14,169 households. For 2 seasons, the sample consists of 28,338 households. So it's a huge number which was done during 2018-19 years, and the data consists of 17-18. Now, household characteristics, if we see, out of 14,169 households, 20% were scheduled caste, 58% were OBCs, and 20% were others, 1.1% ST, because ST is very thinly populated in Uttar Pradesh. If we categorize them into marginal, small, semi-medium, medium, and large, not following the census definition, which is different, because in Uttar Pradesh, the holdings are much smaller. So marginal, we made less than half acre, half to 1 acre we made small, 1 to 2 acre semi-medium, 2 to 4 acre medium, and 4 acre large. This was the definition we took. Large farmers generally is having above 10 acres, but in our case it is 4 acres. So if we see the representation, marginal was 17.6%, small 32%, semi-medium 25%, and medium 16%. Large with 4 acres also, their total share was only less than 9%. If we see the main occupation of the households, 81% household had agriculture as their main occupation. Casual labor was for 10%, salaried class 6.3%. So this is the distribution, and the aggregate income we estimated was rupees 8,903 monthly per household income. I will be giving the details of that. I'll come back to it. Now, from agroclimatic zones, if we see the Bundelkhand region had the highest large, medium, and large holdings, whereas northeastern plain had the smallest numbers. This is the land which is more unfertile. So large holdings are there in Bundelkhand, but their productivity is much less. If we divide, if we see the villages, we surveyed 444 villages. Sample was 32 households each village, and there were 60% household who also reported having some secondary occupation in addition to primary occupation. I will just skip other details because time is short. Now, if we see the total 14,169 households, the agriculture as a main occupation for SC, 73% household in SC category had agriculture as main occupation, 81% had ST had main occupation, 83% OBC, and 84% general. The what I am just trying to show here, daily casual labor was the main occupation of 20% among SC, 14% among ST, and among the salaried job, general category had around 8.5%, others had very less amount. Among the cropping pattern, if we see what crops the households were growing, there is a distribution given across various agroclimatic regions, but I just described the aggregate. Paddy and wheat constituted almost 63-64%. Sugarcane was 9%. Kharif core cereals, which constitutes maize, was 8.4%. Pulses, including arhar, red gram, 4.9%. And Rabi oilseed, which had sesamum, till 4%. So this was the main cropping pattern. Net operated area was less than 2 acres on an average, which varied among various agroclimatic regions, and cropping intensity was 1.7 on the aggregate. Now, coming to income, for the entire state, average income estimated was 8,903 from all the categories, which varied from 16,457 for Western Plain and 13,351 for Tarai region, because they are more fertile, compared to only 6,500 for Eastern Plain and 6,600 for Vindhyan. If we divide this 8,903 across marginal, small, medium, and large farmers, the small farmer had only 57% of the aggregate income. Small had 69%, semi-medium 91%, whereas medium had much higher than the average, 132%, and large farmer had 263, that is 2.63 times compared to the average of the state. Similarly, if we divide the income into different categories, cultivation contributed 51% of the total income, whereas 7% came from animal farming, 37% came from non-base and salary, and 3% came from the other business. So this was the largely distribution across different agroclimatic zones. Like cultivation contributed 70% in Babar, and Western Plains 65%, and while other zones had much less. You can see from the blue figures here. Now coming to marginal, small, medium, and large in the cultivation, taking the first category of cultivation, which contributed 4,577 out of the 8,900 as the aggregate income. The marginal had only 17% of the total cultivation income. small had 39%, whereas large has 416%. That is 4 times higher. So, and when we see cultivation alone, the small farmers and medium farmers, small and marginal farmers had much less proportion from the cultivation compared to medium and large farmers. Similarly, we can see agroclimatic distribution in Western Plain and Babar. More than double income came from cultivation compared to almost half in the case of Vindhyan and Eastern Plain. Similarly, animal farming also had some tilt towards medium and large farmers. Out of 586 rupees of total income from animal husbandry, the medium and large farmers had more higher income from animal husbandry compared to marginal, small and medium farmers. Agriculture wages constituted more for the marginal small farmers, that is 153 and 117, whereas for the large farmer it was only 36% coming from the agriculture wages. Similarly, non-agriculture wages, salaried, the marginal small, they made their deficit in the cultivation income from the from non-farming activities and wages, whereas large farmers and medium farmers, they had much less proportion from the non-farming activities. Similarly, business also, we can see there is no particular pattern. There was a distribution across different, but it was the contribution of business was much less, only 3%, 311 rupees per month per household was contributed by the business, that is mainly shop and others. Now coming to the cost of cultivation and productivity, I just show you a picture where Uttar Pradesh stands in the productivity of different crops. Like in pulses, arhar, Uttar Pradesh had our average, the household average was only 2.2 quintals, whereas all India yield for the year 17-18, for the year for which we have our survey data, it was 3.68 quintals. In urad, 1.3 compared to 2.6. Sugarcane was the main commodity of Uttar Pradesh, but still we had 251 quintals compared to 297 all India average. Similarly, sesamum had almost half. Paddy and potato, we stand slightly better than all India, 14 compared to 10 and 107 compared to 95. In wheat also it was 12.9 compared to 13.09, and Bengal gram 2.9 compared to 4.3, mustard 4.5 compared to 5.2. So in most of the commodities except paddy and potato, Uttar Pradesh productivity was less than all India. In some cases it was almost half. That is a worrisome picture. Average prices also, if we see, except the case of sugarcane, where farmers got better price compared to minimum support price. In all other commodities, the average prevailing price which farmers obtained as per our survey was less than the minimum support price. Farmers were not able to obtain at least the minimum price also. Now, if we see the net receipt value of output minus the cost per acre, the sugarcane yielded 51,986 per acre, potato 49,615. So these were the two very high remuneration crops for the farmers, compared to only less than 3,000 in the case of urad and 3,800 in the case of sesamum. The other crops like wheat and paddy, they were in the middle. And Bengal gram mustard was also much less than wheat and paddy. So this is the profitability where farmers have much better position in the cash crops like sugarcane and potato, which does not compare even half getting from the other crops. Food grains was much less. Now I have given here crop-wise value of different components of cost. If we see cost per quintal, In the case of arahar, urad, til, gram and mustard, cost was more than 1,000 rupees per quintal compared to food grains and sugarcane, which was much less. Accordingly, price also varies in the market. So I'll just keep this cost component rupees per quintal for the. I think I have already spoken about it.
I think it's
I'll just
almost
skip
6:30.
these,
Can
slides.
you get some
Now I'll
conclusion?
come to the slide where we have 17-18 our income compared with the National Sample Survey situation assessment which was done in 2013-14. We have used the GSDP agriculture growth rate of Uttar Pradesh and calculated 15-16 because 15-16 was the terminal year where we wanted to double the farmers' income from 13,000 to 27,000. So this 2015-16 we we compare it with actual growth rate 17-18 and what was the required growth rate for doubling farmers' income. The required growth rate from 15-16 to 22 is 10%, 10.4%. This is all real prices. Our achieved.
Sir, you already taken 23 minutes.
21% in central zone and 28% in southwest semi-arid zone. In other zones, we had slightly less than compared to the required growth rate. Only in the case of mid-western plain zone, it was minus 11.6. That means income has gone down rather than increasing. So at the overall state, compared to 10.4, our survey is 11.9. But I would just give the caveat that we have our household survey which may not match with the national sample survey. So it is not that we are comparing the two similar surveys. We are comparing our survey with the national sample survey. So this is the picture which is emerges. Now I will just conclude in 2 minutes. For agriculture year 17-18, average monthly income of farm household is estimated to be around 8,903. Huge variations have been observed across 9 agroclimatic zones. 4 agroclimatic zones, namely Western Plain Zone, 16,000, Babar and Trai, 13,000, Southwestern Semi-Arid and Zone, 10,000, and Midwestern Plain Zone, 8,900 were observed above the state average income of the sample households. Across farm categories, income varied from 5,000 holding less than 0.5 acres to 23,000 holding greater than 4 acres. It can be seen from the farm households have diversified their income sources. Income from cultivation was 4,500, which is 51%, followed by non-farm based 3,300, which is 37%, while it was just rupees 586 from animal farming, which is only 6.5%. The status of agriculture development and doubling farmers' income mainly depends on improvement in crop productivity, livestock productivity, resource use efficiency, increasing cropping intensity, diversification towards high-value crops, improvement in real prices, and shift from farm to non-farm occupations. Areas with higher proportion of smaller holding witness lower income from cultivation. Interestingly, smaller holdings match productivity of large holdings in food grains, although there remains huge gap in productivity of cash crops. Estimates suggest considerable variation in productivity of various crops across zones. Productivity of paddy varies from 18.7 quintal per acre in Babar and Tarai to 10 quintals per acre in Bundelkhand. Similarly, productivity of wheat varies from 16 quintal in Western Plains to 9 quintal per acre in Vindhyan zone. The animal farming requires major push. Being third major source of income at the aggregate state level, its share was just 6.5%, which is distant, far distant from the contribution from the cultivation, which was more than 50%. And non-farm employment, including both wages as well as salary in average farm household income, that needs enhancement. There has been wide variation across zone against the aggregate income from animal farming of rupees 586 with the share of 14% and 11% in Bundelkhand and southwestern zone. The income accrued was around rupees 1,000 and 1,200 respectively. So it was much higher in these zones compared to the other. The most important dimension of the farmer's income is marketing of agriculture produce. So 3 dimensions of marketing of agriculture commodities are seen: sale of crop produce at different time intervals, sale of crop produce of different agencies, and sale of crop produce to distance point of sale. So we need to make marketing measures which keep our farmers having much less price compared to minimum support price, which is their basically the cost estimates. The marketing has to be strengthened in the state at a much larger level. Farmers are a diversified group with wide variation across regions and landholding sizes. They have their specific strengths and weaknesses. A policy regime that addresses specific needs of a particular group of farmers would be more helpful in raising farmers' income rather than a uniform policy for all the farmers. Those who have recorded their monthly income below the state average income households are to be uplifted in order to reach the targeted income level. Assured irrigation has been identified as one of the major drivers in enhancement of farmers' income from cultivation, especially in areas that are deficit in irrigation infrastructure. Water resources in the state agriculture system is mainly dependent on tube wells and wells. I think there is need for strengthening the other surface water sources as well. There should be reduction of input cost of cultivation, which has occupied major proportion of each crop being cultivated by the farming community in Uttar Pradesh. Now, 2 more slides. Access to formal finance is second major contributor to enhancement of our income from cultivation. A number of policy initiatives in this area have been helpful to farmers. However, small farmers' access to banks and cooperatives for finance is rather limited. These are all coming from our field survey findings. Tenant farmers are a major group that solely relies on informal sources of finance because of linkage between land ownership and formal finance. Farmers need to be encouraged to diversify beyond wheat and paddy, as they both occupy 63% of gross crop area, given better returns from cash crops. So they need to be oriented towards more and more horticulture and other cash crops. Considering the small size of holdings, marginal and small farmers should be encouraged to engage in cooperative farming, preferably farmer producer organization, farmer producer companies. I think that is the better option for the smaller holding states. It is required to examine the implementation of crop insurance scheme. Farmers are unable to take full advantage of the scheme given low awareness and lack of network of insurance companies. The design of the scheme may be revised to make it more farmer friendly. As seen from the above analysis, non-farm income is a major source for the farm households in the state, especially among small holdings and low productivity zones. In view of this, it is essential to develop non-farm activities and encourage agro-processing through the means of MSMEs. They are already dominant in the state, and they need to be diversified in different zones. Land and farm manpower are 2 most potent aspects of the farm holdings. Therefore, to enable food utilization of these both through enhancing cropping intensity and promoting secondary agriculture such as agroforestry, horticultural activities, other allied activities like fish farming, beekeeping, floriculture, they need to be helped. Livestock insurance scheme needs to be restructured to cover both death and permanent damages, and it should be made more farmer friendly on the lines of Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and concentration.
If we had known it will be 30 minutes, we should have set up a separate talk. So I don't know. Anyway, Professor Mehrotra. Professor Mehrotra?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah,
Dr.
please.
Virmani, thank you very much. And thanks to good friend Charan for inviting me. We've had a lot of numbers, so I'm not going to, speak about a lot of numbers at all. I'm actually going to make essentially 2 arguments, and I'd be delighted to hear comments from all of you, in fact. Now, soon after independence, the per capita income in UP and in the southern states, in other words, in the northern states generally, and in the southern states were roughly similar. And in 55, in fact, 1955, the share of the population below the poverty line by the NSS around 1955 in UP was 64%, not much different from that of the Madras state. which of course later became Tamil Nadu. Now, 4 decades later, in 93, 94, the poverty rates were not that different between the northern and the southern states, and India's poverty rate was 45%, UP's was 48%, and Tamil Nadu was at about 45%. So what happened? What changed? It seems, I mean, when I analyze the data, and what I'm about to say is actually analyzed discussed at some length in a paper published 6 months ago in Economic and Political Weekly, which is entitled "Why Human Development Should Precede Economic Growth in the States," which is a very technical paper drawing upon several months of data analysis. And essentially, we conclude the following: that the divergence, very significant divergence, happens after the economic reforms begin. So what we are able to demonstrate in that paper is that states like Kerala, the southern states generally, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, these are the states, particularly the southern ones, which sustained over 7% growth over a 28-year period from 92 to 2018. We look at this long time span, and they are able to sustain, while the remaining states, which tend to be mainly the northern ones, their average growth rate over this entire period is actually below 5% per annum. I'm talking about GSDP, not per capita. And essentially what we conclude is the following. And we developed a conceptual model, which we test quite carefully, that, the southern states had been investing, particularly post-92, a considerable share of the GSDP on both health and education dimensions of development. As a result, most of these states had not only been performing consistently in terms of growth of HDI, and their relative rankings also remained high, but this also, we argue, enabled them to maintain a consistent, non-volatile growth rate of GSDP above 7% per annum over this entire 28-year period. Now, this is the sort of first point which I wanted to make, but what I wanted to sort of investigate really greater is, why is it that the southern states, the western states, tended to, by and large, invest more in human development indicators? And we then, in the published paper, we try and demonstrate that there is a very strong causal relationship between high human development and sustained economic growth. But anyway, no more on that. We leave it to, we whetted your appetite, and hopefully you will read that paper, because it's an all India paper. But what is the difference? What is it that explains the difference in the investment in human development, which we believe explains this increasing divergence in growth rates and, in fact, in human development outcome indicators. So I'm going to, in the rest of my presentation, in the next 10 minutes, and I expect not to take more than 10, to stick to my 15 minutes as allocated. What are the what I believe are the structural factors that could have resulted in this situation? And we take the argument deeper by taking the analysis to the economic agrarian systems first, which I'll talk about in a minute, as well as sociological and political categories. We take those into account to understand this, the phenomenon of northern states underperforming compared to the southern ones. I'm not, again, simplifying, it's northern and eastern as opposed to southern and western, but just for brevity's sake, I'm going to call them northern southern. And the underperformance is both in economic, as I've said, as well as in human development indicators. So first, let's turn to the agrarian. The economic bases of the two regions of India, even at risk of some simplification, were historically different. The agrarian systems of what I'm calling, again for simplicity, Hindi belt, which were part of the Calcutta presidency, from colonial times diverged significantly from those in the provinces of the Madras and Bombay presidencies. And the Hindi belt, including Bengal, had a zamindari system of revenue collection since the permanent settlement of 1793 by Lord Cornwallis, and this involved an intermediary between the peasant and the colonial state to perform the collection function. Now, this was a brutally exploitative system which subjected peasants to extraordinary extraction of surplus, meant to feed the colonial state's appetite for both loot and funds for administration. The Gangetic plainland was fertile, which only marginally offset the effects of this exploitation of the peasantry. On the other hand, in Bombay and Madras presidency lands in southern Western India mainly, the Rayatwari system prevailed, and here there was no intermediary between the peasant and the king. There was a direct link between the peasant. There was a direct link between the peasant and the Raja, Maharaja, or the British vassal. The peasants had complete control over the land, who could sell, cultivate, or lease the land. And even though tax rates were high, 50 to 60%, there was certainty, at least in respect of tax rates. Now, I know that I'm oversimplifying. Professor Ajit Singh is on screen. He has done a detailed paper on this subject, and I could nuance this argument, but in the interest of brevity and in the interest of time, unfortunately, we don't have the time because I have two other arguments to make in order to be able to finish before my 15 minutes are up. Now, so turning to the second difference which I briefly dwelt upon, and this is an argument I think I still have to develop further into a longer paper. The second difference between the southern and most of the Hindi belt of northern India is sociological in nature. What do I mean by that? Well, social movements of lower castes were widespread in much of the south and west of India. And the caste demography in the south and west facilitated the emergence of such social movements. I won't bore you with numbers. The caste demography is rather different in UP. And this social composition, I would argue, together with the power equation resulting from the agrarian legacy of colonial times in the villages, meant that the southern and western states were a fertile ground even in colonial times for lower caste emancipation movements. Recall the movement of Narayana Guru in Kerala, recall Periyar in Tamil Nadu, recall Mahatma Phule in Maharashtra. And these social movements culminating in the emergence of political parties. Now, this is what has contemporary interest. These social movements culminating in the emergence of political parties founded upon these social movements, bore fruit after independence in pressure on rulers, and even in colonial times, I mean, I'm talking about post-colonial, but even in colonial times, to focus on social policies that enabled social indicators to rise. And it's not that the northern states did not experience social movements for the empowerment of scheduled castes or other backward castes post-independence. I don't have to tell this audience that, these social movements were very much there. We've all heard about them, particularly in the last 30 years. The Yadav movement for the OBCs in undivided UP and in undivided Bihar. The scheduled caste mobilization by Jatav leaders, Kashiram, Mayawati, etc. And then the tribals mobilization by the CPIML in Jharkhand and MP and Odisha, Bihar. In last 30 years has broken the Congress dominance in the northern states. However, neither the Zamindari abolition post-1956, nor the Land Sealing Acts, nor these social movements ever managed to break the hold of the feudal forces in these agrarian states. So in other words, I'm talking about an interaction here between these sociological forces and social movements with the agrarian system. If anything, in fact, the dominance of the Congress coalition of caste interests for the first 4 decades was disrupted by the political parties relying upon certain caste groups. But unfortunately, what emerged in many northern states, especially Bihar and UP, is multiple parties, each articulating the interests of specific subcastes within the OBCs and within the scheduled castes. In other words, the articulation of marginalized citizens' interests got fragmented, unlike in the South and in the West. Hence, these political parties, representing caste group interests, very specific caste group interests within the OBC, within the SC, became captive to the interest of the dominant caste within the SCs, the Jatavs in UP that constitute half of the 20% of SCs, and of course, among the OBCs, the Yadav, who constitute, as we all know, big chunks of these caste groups. The result was a fragmentation of the vote with intercaste rivalry and competition for limited resources, undermining governance that could have promoted the cause of an inclusive social policy. And this is in complete contrast to the effects of social movements in southern India on social policy, which led to inclusive, broad social policy with all boats rising with the rising waters. And so the combination of these factors that I've just discussed in several northern states, especially UP, has worked to keep social policy captive to specific subcaste group interests rather than the interest of marginalized groups as a whole, unlike Kerala, unlike Tamil Nadu. So what emerged in the southern states of India, by contrast, was that the entire gamut of marginal groups benefited from social movements with significant social and economic results, as I think my paper has already demonstrated. And so the dominance of two-party systems in most of the southern states has made social and economic policy competition in them more consistent with the interests of the masses, with each party working for more egalitarian policies. And political parties competed electorally in the South on a similarly inclusive social policy. So let me close. I'm closing. Yes, of course, my article or paper in the journal that I mentioned earlier makes a case for much greater investment in human development. It's part of a more broader conceptual model, which I developed some time ago. So clearly, without that, we should not expect sustained economic growth in UP or in the other states. So let me close that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've summarized your paper very well. Thank you. I guess that was the idea, is to get the suggestions. I mean, people who want to go into the more research-oriented can go in later, or one can have a separate talk on that. Thank you. So let me now turn to Shri Alok Ranjan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arvind Virmani. Thank you very much, Professor Charan Singh, for inviting me to speak. I'll take 15 minutes to put forward my views. Well, I am not an academician. I am a public policy person who has formulated public policies and implemented public policies, and I'll speak from that perspective. I was the Chief Secretary of Uttar Pradesh for more than 2 years, and I've also held the assignments of Agriculture Production Commissioner and the Infrastructure and Industrial Development Commissioner, along with various other departments. So I think I have a broad overview of the way the economy of Uttar Pradesh has been functioning, what are the problems, and what maybe can be done if we want to take UP forward. Let me first say, as far as Uttar Pradesh, I think all of you know, this is one humongous kind of a state, If it had been a country, in terms of population, this is the 5th largest country in the world, 220 million population. That means something. That's kind of a state which has its own kinds of strengths and weaknesses. Whereas this population is a weakness in the sense that there's a huge population pressure in the state on the GSDP of the state. At the other end, today, with the demographic dividend, we have the largest number of people in the age group of, employable age group which can be a great source of strength also. And you must be knowing that Uttar Pradesh government has recently started talking about 2027, they want to reach $1 trillion economy, and they have put out some advertisement for consultants also for this. So the UP government also is trying to focus on developing the GDP and taking it to $1 trillion by 2027. Well, that is an aspirational target. It is not really, to my opinion, doesn't seem possible, because today the GDP of the state is around $220 billion. To raise it from $220 billion to $1 trillion by 2027 in 5 years will call for a cumulative average growth rate of more than 30% every year, which is not in the realm of possibility. However, certainly we can improve upon the growth rates which have been existing till the moment. As Professor Santosh Mehrotra pointed out, that has been growing in the range of 5 to 6% per annum over the last 30 years. Certainly we can talk in terms of, it is definitely possible that UP can talk in terms of growing at say 8%, then increasing it to 10%, then we even go 12 to 15%. If that is possible, and if they can do that, then they can come out of that cycle of poverty which the state is in. You know, the whole issue is, as in the beginning pointed out by Dr. Arvind Virmani himself, that today we are second from the bottom as far as per capita income is concerned. Only Bihar is below us, but this was not so in 1947. I think Professor Mehrotra also said this. This was not so there in 1947. At that time, we were somewhere around the middle. UP was somewhere in the middle of all the states, around the average of the national income we were there. But today we are 50% of what the average national income is there. So that is the national per capita income is there. So that is the kind of situation that has come, and why it has happened. Very nicely it was analyzed by Professor Mehrotra. He gave a beautiful analysis of how we have not invested in education and health, how the social characteristics, the social structure, the social movements, various things, the political movements have made a difference. But all said and done, yes, I have also tried to analyze this, and it is important to analyze this if you want to see how UP will go forward. What happened? Why did UP slip so badly from somewhere in the middle, right, to rock bottom? And why has it been staying there for the last 10 years or so? And that is true, that till 1990, the situation was not that bad. But once the economic reforms came in, thereafter the other states took advantage of the economic reforms and grew much faster than the state of Uttar Pradesh did. And consequently, every year you see the position of UP has gone down, and by 2008 or 2009, it has reached the level where it is today. And if it has to improve, it must grow at a rate of growth which is higher than the national per capita income rate of growth. If it does that every year, only then it can come up. And unless UP develops, we are all aware of the fact, it will be difficult for the national GSD, gross domestic product, to grow at the rate that we want it to grow. So otherwise, UP will be pulling it downwards. So UP is so vital and so important. Now, the first sector which is important to Uttar Pradesh is agriculture, which has been beautifully analyzed by Professor Pramod Kumar in great detail event. And I think he's come up with very interesting policy conclusions and suggestions also. And I agree with what he said. I will not repeat many of the things that he said. But just to put the thing in perspective, 75% of the state GSDP comes from agriculture, yet more than 65% of the people in Uttar Pradesh, they subsist on agriculture, which straight away explains the main cause of the poverty in the state. When 65% of people are subsisting on 25% of GSDP, you can understand what is happening in the state. The fragmentation of land holding is there. 0.8 hectares is the average land holding. With that kind of land holding, how is that farmer in a position to dictate any terms to the market? How will he do bargain in the market? He doesn't get the price for his produce at all. And when he doesn't get the price for his produce, he is not able to invest in his farm or make it viable or increase the productivity. So that is why the talk that has come of productivity not having gone up is explained by this to a large extent. For one, I find that the answer is there for this. The answer is in aggregation. Now, aggregation of these land holdings in the form of farmer-producer companies or organizations, FPOs or FPCs, whatever you like to call them, or maybe cooperatives also. The cooperative movement didn't really succeed in Uttar Pradesh. That's why I'm not talking about it. It succeeded in Gujarat, it succeeded in Maharashtra, but in Uttar Pradesh it got so badly politicized that it hasn't succeeded at all. And so I don't see that cooperative movement really, taking wings in Uttar Pradesh. So I go by this farmer-producer company concept, which should be implemented very strongly in Uttar Pradesh. So unless we aggregate the farmers together, they will be in no position to dictate terms to the market or to get a better return from the market, which is very essential. Unless they get a better income from the market, their income will not increase and people will not be released from the agriculture sector to work in the non-farm sector. Now there's so much of disguised unemployment in Uttar Pradesh today. So many people working in the agriculture sector. We must release them and let them go and work in the non-farm sector only then will they get a higher income, and only then will any kind of development take place. So this is, I think, is the first thing. Second, so that means I feel another thing is a lot of investment is required in storage as far as agriculture produce is concerned. We have storage of potatoes, a lot of cold storages. Potato is a major crop that we have, but apart from potato, we don't have any other cold chains or network of cold chains or storages, which is very much required. So this is one area which requires heavy investment. There are Government of India schemes for investment in this kind of infrastructure, but I think state government also needs to come out with complementary schemes to invest in development of the infrastructure. Then things like making the warehouse receipt a negotiable instrument. It is already a negotiable instrument, but to implement it, because what happens is the farmer, the moment the crop comes, he is selling it as a distress sale, so he's not getting income. If he can hold on, just on the basis of that, he gets a warehouse receipt and can get bank finance up to 60-70% on that basis to look after his input needs for the next crop. Then surely he will be in a position to hold on and dispose of his stock in the market when the market price is better. So that, I think, is all very important. We have to focus on increasing the income of the farmer. And Professor Pramod Kumar, I will not again repeat, brilliantly analyze the 9 agroclimatic zones. The problems are different. The problems of Bundelkhand are different. Western UP is different. Eastern UP is different. Vindhyas, Central UP are different. And they need different kind of policy approaches. But yes, I agree with him that animal husbandry is also a vital sector if you want to increase the income of the farmer. I personally felt that thing like fisheries, if it is taken up in a big way in Uttar Pradesh, there are so many ponds available. In every village there is a pond available which can be used for fisheries. This sector alone has a possibility of 16 to 17% growth per annum and can really raise the income of the people. Second, dairy sector. Dairy can bring about a revolution in the state of Uttar Pradesh. We did this when I was the chief secretary. We had the Kamdhenu dairy scheme in which we gave interest subsidy and gave cattle to the farmers, cows to the farmers, which gave highly productive cows, and they started making a difference. So if this sector is focused on and you link it to the market, something kind of an Amul model is implemented, where chilling plants are there, processing plants are there, and this milk is then brought to the market where the farmer gets feed and fodder in support for this. I think a complete, if this kind of an ecosystem is built up, this can bring about a revolution. The two sectors definitely I'll point out, dairy as well as fisheries, which can make a huge difference to the income of the farmer. Of course, we tried with poultry also and made a difference. You know, Uttar Pradesh used to import 1 crore eggs per day from southern states. And then we implemented a scheme for poultry development. And in my time when I was chief secretary, I recall, this had come down to 65 lakhs. So 35 lakhs we were able to make up. But if they persist with it, Uttar Pradesh has the potential to become an exporter of poultry products and not an importer. So this kind of a situation can come, which will bring about a change in the agriculture sector. Very quickly, we must go. I said about non-farm income. But the problem with UP is industrialization has not taken place. That is a very big issue. There is a huge MSME sector here, but still there are, except for Noida, industrialization in UP is totally imbalanced. Where is it happening? It is happening in Noida or Ghaziabad or maybe up to Meerut to some extent. You come the eastward, you come to central UP, you hardly find anything out here. Lot of potential is here. IT hub, we can make it a hub of information technology. No, already Bangalore is saturated, Noida is saturated. No, IT sector can move to places like Lucknow, to places like Kanpur, to places like Prayagraj or Allahabad. IT sector can certainly move, we can develop IT hubs out here. Noida itself can be made a hub for electronics industry and also the new semiconductor industry that can come up in Noida in a big way. So there is potential for it out there. And already in my time, we were negotiating with Taiwan people. Taiwan was willing to come up and set up an industrial estate of their own, Foxconn and others out there, to develop the electronics and the chips industry in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Then food processing. When we said UP is an agricultural state, it has to be made a food processing hub. Every block of Uttar Pradesh, you should have some kind of an agri-processing structure, agri-park or agri-processing units with common facilities made available, where the farmers' produce can be taken and processed. And this will provide immediate employment. You know, our people will not have to go to Surat or Mumbai as migrant labor to get employment. They will move from their farms and get employment within 20 to 50 kilometers from their household in hubs of agro-processing, which can be, the whole state of Uttar Pradesh can be littered with agro-processing hubs. This is one suggestion of mine which will make a big difference. And these hubs can be used as rural growth engines. All possible infrastructure can be given in these areas where these processing industry hubs are there. Then these start acting as rural growth engines and attracting employment to these areas and contributing to development in the surrounding areas. I think there's just a few minutes are left also. I should not miss out on the all important point. I should move, and champion industries can be set up. Champion industries can be set up in Bundelkhand, in central UP and others. And if they are set up there, a whole network of MSME units and ancillary units will come up. It is possible. A defense corridor is a good experiment. If defense corridor succeeds, it will bring in a lot of investment in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Similar things, Bundelkhand, there is so much land available where investment is possible and this kind of an activity can take place. Health, education and healthcare is vital for the development of Uttar Pradesh. Absolutely. There's no two things about it. Professor Mehrotra was absolutely candid. And in both, in education, the quality of education is abysmal. A lot has to be done to improve, especially has to be a special focus, a special mission on foundational literacy or on the primary education level. Because today I find the youth in UP, most of them, if you go around the villages of UP, you find they studied till class 5, 6 or 7, yet they don't even know how to write a simple line or a sentence. If this is the kind of quality of education, how are these people going to participate in the economic development of the state or even in the democracy which is there? So we have to focus on giving quality education at the primary level as also in the level of secondary and higher education level. So education becomes a very, very vital sector, and the focusing has to be on learning competencies and the quality of education. Then again, healthcare. Healthcare, again, a lot of investment is required in healthcare in the state of Uttar Pradesh. We need more hospitals, we need more doctors, we need more ICU beds, we need, a kind of more paramedical staff, nurses and paramedics. So no colleges have to be set up to come up for develop paramedics, to have nursing institutes, then also come up with more doctors, more medical colleges are required in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And not only that, how do we take medical health care to the rural areas? Well, there is so much positive health care in the rural areas. And for the last 35 years, 38 years, I was in service. Right from the beginning, we used to say, doctors are not coming to the primary health centers. The same problem is there today. Doctors are not coming to the primary health center. Somehow we have to think of an innovative model. If doctors are not coming, then how do we make it possible to take health care there? Maybe more medical mobile units is the answer. Maybe telemedicine is the answer. These are the things which have to be looked into to somehow see that quality health care is made available to the people in the rural areas, because as it happened in COVID times, people in the rural areas did not know where to go to get treatment. The hospitals were far away, and the district hospitals were also far away. And even the district hospitals are not well equipped. There's shortage of doctors, there's shortage of specialists. So I think healthcare is an area which needs very, very sharp focus. So education and health has to be focused on if we want to have quality manpower available, and this quality manpower then can be employed in industry, and then in services sector to make this happen. Then in tourism also there is a tremendous potential in the state of Uttar Pradesh for generating employment. We have Varanasi, we have Agra, we have Lucknow, we have eco-tourist zones. There are a lot of spots which can be developed, and this is one area which gives a large amount of employment to the people and needs a sharp focus. Urban development is an area, ignored area in the state of Uttar Pradesh to a large extent. Somehow the urban growth is not as fast as it is in the rest of states like Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra or others. If we want to develop, then urban centers have to become growth engines. And for that, we have to provide basic minimum services to the urban areas. We have to put specialization into sanitation, into waste management, into supply of water supply for 24/7, sewage treatment plants. So many other things can be thought of which require a lot of investment. So whole gamut of thinking has to go into a model for developing urban finances and urban governance. Both are required. We require a specialized urban governance, and we require some models whereby urban financing can be, tackled. Then the cities will grow. When the cities will grow, they will attract people from outside. Today, people from here are going outside to other states, getting attracted there. Instead, we get them jobs there, and we attract people from outside into our state. And then finally, law and order is vital, security is vital. That feeling of law, security has to be there in the people if we want economic development of the state to take place. I think by and large, these are the points I wanted to emphasize today. And I hope I finished it within 15 minutes. This is a broad of the policy overview which I have tried to give the area.
Thank you. I think it's very useful to have both a theoretical, analytical perspective and a practical one, because we sometimes forget one or the other.
Thank you.
So let's turn to our last speaker, Shri Ranjan Dwivedi. Shri Dwivedi? Charan, we had.
Is it unmuted now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
There
very
you
much.
are. Okay.
Yeah, so Dr. Virmani, thank you very much. And Mr. Charan Singh, thank you so much for the opportunity of participating in this today's webinar. And
Would you like to switch on your video?
Yeah, I want to do that, but
Okay.
the settings got a little, yeah, I just spent time doing it. So
It's okay.
I'll try and do it later during discussion. Maybe. Yeah, so, the excellent perspectives on the theory and the reasons for the current morass in UP were laid out by the first two speakers. And of course, my service here and mentor in some sense, Mr. Alok Ranjan, he has given a huge list of what can be done, what should be done in sectors we need to invest in. Now, there's just a few things I'd like to add to what's been said. As was mentioned earlier, that India, if it was a country, would be the fifth largest country in the world. We are bigger than Brazil, and which is the sixth now. So facilities and the infrastructure and whatever is needed for a country as big as Brazil should be there in UP. And to think small will remain in a vicious circle of underdevelopment. So we have to think really big. And just to give you a small examples of this, and the difference, Professor Mehrotra pointed out about the better healthcare in the southern states. Now, when I was working on the issue in 2006, there were 151 nursing colleges in Karnataka, and in UP there was just one. So that kind of showed the kind of haters we have and how much neglect has there been in education and in health in UP. The current government is to be congratulated for, of course, putting up a medical college in each district, and which has to be followed up with another medical, maybe nursing college, and for paramedics and so on. But coming back to the macro situation, if UP is so large, and unfortunately the culture, the administrative culture in UP also is extremely wanting. Mr. Alok Ranjan is here, so he's been chief secretary and I've been in the police for a long time. But I would confess that it's extremely poor, and there's so many examples where industry could have easily come in here in UP, but because of the status consciousness of our bureaucrats, of our public servants, and an extremely poor culture, they just went away without going into examples. So the first thing we have to work on is somehow making the administrative unit much smaller than what it is today. I mean, it's impossible to take care of Ranakpur in the same way from Lucknow. But if you have some kind of a Rajdhani, a mini capital in maybe 5 cities located in these different zones, properly empowered, that Lucknow then is not needed. Perhaps even maintaining the political objective of having UP as a very large state and a huge say in the selection of the Prime Minister, because I mean that's probably one argument people have for not dividing the states into five or six or whatever units. But if we decentralize in a big way, decision making in a big way, then administration would vastly improve than it is today. I mean that's extremely important. We already had an example of Andhra wanting to have 2 capitals, when UP has a strong justification for having at least 5 capitals across, or let's say up Rajdhanis in the state. So that's one. Secondly, Mr. Alok Ranjan spoke of education, and as did Professor Mehrotra. Now, besides the quality of education, the syllabus is antiquated. What we are teaching is antiquated. The pedagogy is antiquated. I mean, what you need is project work, group work, which teaches people to work together. But we are still, and it's very unfortunate. I mean, it's not just UP, but even in the country, even if you take Delhi University, the best colleges, even there, the syllabus is antiquated. The pedagogy is still that lecture method, and you write some tutorials, and that's the end of it. There is absolutely no emphasis on group work, on project work, which is what really we need to promote individuals who can go forward, become entrepreneurs, and take the state forward. So it's the way we teach, what we teach is extremely important, and it will have an impact much later. But if we start soon, perhaps maybe not the next 5 years, but 10 years, we might end up with a trillion economy. And now, the issue of so much coming from agriculture and what's required has already been said. But on there's one aspect which has not been touched, and I think which can be very important. UP is a state with very high out migration. People go from UP, go to different parts of the country and come back. Now, if we can streamline this and leverage this the way the country leverages NRIs, if UP can leverage its migrants, provide a structure, a safety net for migrants, perhaps issue migrant bonds whereby the migrants' income is invested properly and savings are channelized in proper ways, then perhaps it can be used and leveraged in a big way in developing the state. Currently, what happens, I mean, when you work in the districts, you find people working in Bombay would be sending huge amounts of money to, let's say, Jaunpur or any district used to UP, and all that would be getting into litigation. People just squandering it away without it finding a way into becoming an investable surplus. So that is one area which can be leveraged in a huge way. Mr. Alok Ranjan has already mentioned about IT hubs. The way the state has ventured into opening a medical college in every district, I think it's time that in every commissionerate, in every division headquarter, we should have a software technology park. And now with COVID, people are now used to working from remote. Any call center you see, anyone you speak to, the person is sitting in Gorakhpur and talking to you. So that can be leveraged in a big way to retain the population back here, provide. And there's another problem that a lot the cultural nature of families is such they would not like their children to go out. So ultimately, skilled people keep working at very low levels. But if we provide this infrastructure, this IT infrastructure and software technology parks at the divisional level, and then gradually later at the state and the district level, then perhaps a huge difference can be made to incomes from the tertiary and service sector. Now these are just the initial few points I wanted to make, and later in the discussion, something else comes up, I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you. That's very useful. There are a number of issues which come up actually. In 2006, actually, there are very important points you have made, and it's very good to be reminded and in a way confirmed from the ground up. In 2006, I did a review for the Planning Commission, for the Deputy Chairman actually, on the public health and public education systems. And my conclusion was exactly that, exactly the points you have talked about, the absence of public doctors, the absence of teachers, etc. And this was not a new problem then, 2006, this is 2022. We had been trying for 20 or 30 years before with all kinds of ways of keeping them there, getting them there, forcing them, putting 2-year requirements on MDs that they must work in rural areas. Nothing worked. And I basically came to the conclusion, and it's useful to get the same point from both of you, practical people, that the only way to do it was use the internet. You just cannot force people to go and work in the rural areas, but you can connect them and be taught from wherever the fellow is living in the nearest district place and so on. So I think it's very nice to hear both of you actually, people emphasize this quality of education, and that's basically the foundation. So, but I still have questions. I think, you talked about, so one is clearly that the issue of connectivity and using the internet to improve the quality. The other is the kind of things which always are mentioned, and clearly they are important. But the other aspect which I think is, you talk about UP being less educated, less skilled, and then on the other hand, you talk about why animal husbandry is not there, fishery, etc., etc. So the question which arises in my mind is that perhaps they don't have the skills, and to get the skills and impart the skills is not. You don't have to make everybody a graduate. I mean, you can impart appropriate skills to each person. So I was just wondering. I don't know if any of the speakers have something to comment on that. The issue of skills, because not everything requires, let's say, to have a high school completion or a 3-year college degree. I mean, you need skills. You can double the productivity if you do manage your cows better, for example, or and so on. I mean, there is an issue of skills there, which none of you mentioned, but if somebody wants to talk about that. The second point which I noticed, which again is very interesting because which confirms what, because of all these farm issues which have come up in the last 2 years, the FPO point, which I think you mentioned, Mr. Ranjan. And I claim, again, the issue which we have addressed for the last, I don't know how many decades, is that why cooperatives didn't work in UP, and you clearly, I think some of you, all of you probably know that the whole issue is politicization and other things. But so, I remember Dr. Alok talking about the Multi-State Cooperative Act, I don't know, 20 years ago or 30 years ago in the Planning Commission. But FPO is a thing which has not been tried, and a number of people have been saying, well, we've tried all these other things, maybe this is the way to go. So I just pick out a couple of things. So it's useful to have different perspectives. With that, I think I'll call Professor Vishendas. Do you want to raise some questions or very quick comments? We don't have the time. And Dr. Charan Singh first, and then Professor Vishendas. Charan Singh? Dr. Charan Singh?
Sir, if you permit, can we extend by 15 minutes our discussion today, or you want to close at 7:30?
No,
Interesting.
I will extend, but I want it. I don't want it extended indefinitely. So yeah.
Okay. So
you want to go Charan first or Dr. Vishendas?
Can I make 4 quick observations?
Yeah, please, Dr. Charan Singh and then Dr. Vishendas.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. The first is an observation because we have 2 practical senior level officers here with us. And I totally agree with Mr. Ranjan Dwivedi ji when he spoke about the size of the state. And I always thought the states in southern India are much smaller. The states which have progressed rapidly are much smaller. So maybe that is one thing. But if there are political reasons, it can't be done, it can't be done. But then one question that comes up, and that was for Alok Ranjan ji, that how come Gurgaon developed so rapidly and why UP could not take that advantage? Was it the law and order? Because in Gurgaon, the law and order is so good relatively vis-a-vis Noida, Greater Noida. My second observation is, and that goes to the argument which Professor Mehrotra made. Now, I have been thinking of late because I live in UP and my family lives in UP for nearly 100 years. I live in UP and I make that observation. How much of education is necessary if education is necessary? Should we focus more on, because Banaras Hindu University is here, and that's amongst the oldest universities of our country, and so is Allahabad University. So how much of education is necessary, if education is necessary, or should we focus on vocational training and skill development? The third, now UP has the unique characteristic of having Ayodhya and Mathura both. So religious tourism worldwide, not only for devout Hindus, but anybody in the world would be so potent. And I have been to Mathura and I can tell you it doesn't stand the test of time. If you compare it with the rest of the world for tourism, compare it with Vatican, even compare it with the Golden Temple, it doesn't stand the test of time. So why was religious tourism not explored? Leave aside the nature tourism. Now, bird sanctuaries right at Bharatpur are so beautiful, but migratory birds going to Bharatpur go via UP at many places, and those have not been developed at all. And the last point I want to make is, sir, I think we have emphasized a lot on agriculture. It is interesting to know that animal husbandry, honey farming can be done. But how about MSMEs? What have we done so that the MSMEs can take off? Did we think in terms of entrepreneurs universities, MSME universities? So with that, I'll just make these 4 observations if anyone wants to react. Thank you for
So let me just take Professor Vishandas, and then if somebody wants to react, all these points together. Professor? I can't hear you. Mute, unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Virmani and all the speakers. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, the agriculture productivity and the contribution of agriculture in UP's economy is very, very formidable. And I carefully listened Dr. Ashok, Alok Ranjanji and other experts. My case is that MG Narega, which provides a job at very low level of wages, say between 250 to 300 rupees a day for 100 days. Now, I did an experiment, rather survey in Gujarat when I was the chairman in CACP, and then agriculture labor were not available because many the diamond merchants, they took the labor from agriculture, they upscale their skills and their wages increased to 5 to 6 times. And with that, the farmers' income increased. Similarly, my short point is that agriculture labor are many more, and the labor productivity in agriculture, especially in UP, is very low. So that means there is a disguise in unemployment or disguise employment. So there has to be upskilling the skill of the unskilled worker, because there are not many agriculture workers are required. Second point is there is a lot of demand of agriculture commodity, especially of the organic products. There is a great demand for export. India exported agriculture commodity worth 50 billion US dollar during the preceding year, and which is a record. And I'm sure UP has contributed a lot in terms of paddy and other things. And then one village and one product model has to be developed, and the demand has to be the production has to be in sync with the demand. Now what is happening, farmers keep on producing the traditional crops, for instance the paddy and wheat, and regardless of the demand. So what farmers produce is no less precious than the gold. Only thing is they are not producing as per the demand, and therefore they are not realizing the higher prices. And so we have to keep this thing on in mind. And PM Gati Shakti, because most of the agriculture commodity are perishable, their shelf life is very low, therefore it has to be quickly transported to the demand center, not on the production center. And the studies show that a lot of wastage takes place because they are not able to reach to the demand center. So PM Gati Shakti is going to provide a lot of boost to agriculture in UP especially, and then labor productivity has to increase. These are my few suggestions for increasing or at least moving towards the 1 trillion economy of the UP. And one small question, our panelist talked about the farmer's income. Has he taken the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, that 6,000 rupees is given to the farmer, into account when he has quoted the figures? And that is very important. And the last point is, when he's comparing the size-wise income of different class of small, marginal, and so on and so forth, that is, to my mind, is not very good comparison unless you see even in the each size class what is the income per hectare, because the land is a very important factor of production. So you have to see what is the per hectare income realized by a smaller, what and similar parameter for the marginal and medium and large farmer. So this is my suggestion. Thank you, sir. And I would expect.
So just let me add 2 things and then see if discussants have any comments. One is the issue of public health versus personal health. My general experience is that it's really, the sewage, sanitation, etc., is really much more important for the poor, the lower half of the population than the specific. Headlines are made by like one person not being able to get to hospital and is, has to get a three-wheeler, but public health is a silent killer, through all the sanitation, etc. So just if anybody has views on that. And second one is, I wanted to take note of what Mr. Dwivedi said. Yeah, I mean, the problem of skills actually is both a matter of supply and demand. If you have a skilled person on, and there's no job in UP, he's going to migrate, right? But then if you had connectivity and this whole new work from home movement, the whole thing changes completely, And so connectivity is very important. This is something we pointed out in EGROW, in our paper on Vision 2050. I mean, I would urge some of you, if you are interested, those are general ideas for all India, but maybe some of them may be more relevant for UP also. With that, I can give an option. Do you maybe go in the same sequence if somebody wants to say, Professor, by speaker, the order in which we had. You don't have to, but if you want to say something on any of these issues, or should I go? Don't see Mr. Kumar, Professor Kumar. Let's see. Yeah. Professor Kumar, you want to say something? No. Okay. Professor Mehrotra, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to respond both to Dr. Charan Singh as well as to you, Dr. Virmani.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Sorry, who was that? Is that, I don't know. Since I've started,
okay, yeah, why don't you do it? Then we'll go back to Professor Kumar. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, let me just finish.
Yeah.
So, on Dr. Virmani, your point about skills. Now, unfortunately, in our country, it's not actually fully understood that skills has three components. It's not only vocational skills. The first is foundational skills, which is cognitive skills, literacy and numeracy skills. The second is transversal skills or transferable skills, like, soft skills. And the third is the technical and vocational. And the problem in UP and in most of the northern states is that learning levels are extremely low. I don't have to tell you what ASA reports are telling us for the whole country. The trouble is in UP, it is much worse. That's the bottom line. If you cannot impart vocational skills to people who are themselves practically illiterate. This is point one. Point two, the overall skills impartation model or skills development model in our country in the last 10 years has not changed. It has remained one, supply driven, and hence government driven, government financed, government managed. All countries of the world which have successful skill development ecosystems, it is a system which is demand driven and hence employer and industry driven. If we don't understand this across the country, I mean, you can't solve this problem. Let me turn to that point in the same regard that Dr. Charan, I say this on the strength of 10 years of research and ever since I was in the Planning Commission with you, I wrote the chapter on employment and skill development for the 12th five-year plan, and since then have done vast amounts of research in this area, empirical as well as international, in India as well as international. Now, Dr. Charan Singh asked the question, how much education is enough? Well, let me give you some data. I didn't in the earlier round, but this is all data which is in the paper that I mentioned, and you can see what the mean years of schooling in UP are relative to the national average, and compare that to Kerala or Tamil Nadu. There's a world of a difference. I mean, the national average for mean years of schooling in 17, 18 is 5.9 years. In UP, it's 5.3 years. And I could go back and it is exactly the same because I have data for 2004, 5, 93. I won't go there. I won't go there. So what is the problem? The school system in UP is not performing, and the government needs to take note of that. There's a million things that can be done. We have too little time. And I'll come to Dr. Virmani's point about, public health, meaning sanitation. In
Sorry, you'll have to be quick. You have to.
Just 2 points, 2 sentences, Dr. Virmani.
Yeah, just we don't have time for long justification. Just make your point.
The point is about.
We believe you. We believe you. You don't have to justify.
The point about vocational education, absolutely spot on, sir.
That's not my point. You keep referring to me.
So the point I'm making is that if you do not divert students after secondary and higher secondary into vocational, you will get this massification, which has already happened in higher education, creating unemployables. And last point, Dr. Virmani, about sanitation. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. But look at what the UP numbers are telling us. The Public Health Fund, the NFHS 5, the latest. Certainly, very good news. Sanitation, and access to toilets, facilities up from 36% to 69% between 2015 and 2020, though nowhere close to the 99% claimed by the current UP government. So I'm saying, even after this massive improvement, 1/3 of the households in the state are still without it. And I'm not even talking about the public health measures. I've done a whole paper for the UP state government, which provided input into a state health policy, which unfortunately never saw the light of day 4 years ago for the Yogi government. Thank you. Thank you.
You would have been very happy if you had given those instead of the all India results. This whole discussion is on UP, not on general issues. Anyway, it's fine. So, Professor Ranjan himself, Dr. Shri Ranjan pointed out that he has met people who had supposedly done 5 years of education and couldn't read and write. So so nobody says you don't have good quality basic education. You can't do anything without basic education. That's not a factor to dispute. Obviously, the skills have, and that fellow is incapable of even reading a little pamphlet on dairy. I mean, obviously you have to, and that's what Acer has shown repeatedly. So we are not discussing politics here. We are just discussing what are the issues. That's all we are trying to do here. So the issue which I had raised was how important is public health versus the other issues of doctors, etc., which we have also discussed, which Mr. Dwivedi also pointed out.
One without the other.
That's not the question. It's not a question of one is more important, the other is not important, whether this government has done something or that government. The question is to get the view of experts on what is the relative importance, where to focus, what are the policy issues that should be discussed, etc. But anyway, let me come back to Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, I have 2-3 observations. I'll take 2 minutes. The FPO, of course, UP needs. It is reinforced by the fact that it is very small holding, which cooperative farming failed, but we can definitely try with FPO with a better mechanism. Regarding the question MG Narega and the clash with agriculture, of course, MG Narega suck out some of the labor meant for agriculture. But given the fact that so much of migration takes place from UP, so that indicates there is no dearth of labor. Actually, skill development, this something which was mentioned, is needed for higher wages. It is not the low wage work in agriculture and engineering. I think we have enough labor available. The only lack is killing the labor for higher remuneration. One village, one product to sync with the demand. I think that is the point I was raising, that farmers need to move into cash crops, which are high remuneration crops, and small farmers, they are better adults for the horticultural crops. They cannot survive on food grains, which are low value crops. I have shown pulses, oil seeds, they all utilize very low remuneration. And the demand there is for high value products, so the farmers have to diversify if they have to survive.
Thank you.
One question related to farmers' income per hectare versus per household. Of course, sir, we have calculated per household as well as per hectare. That is there. But when I am comparing the aggregate income, clubbing the income coming from the allied activities and at the household level aggregate income, there in that context I am comparing small versus large farmers to reinforce that a small farmer is the one who is at the bottom of the income bracket. But in our study we have taken care of that.
Yes.
Definitely. And thank you. I will take more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn to Mr. Ranjan, I have found it useful to think of skills in form of unskilled, semi-skilled, and skilled.
Yes.
That is a division I found useful for practical purposes. So when I'm talking about whether it's fisheries or animal husbandry, I'm not talking about labor. I'm talking about the skills needed to efficiently, raise a cow or do fisheries or whatever else we can think of, which had been suggested at the village level. Even one product, food processing. When we talk about semi-processing, before you send it to a proper industry, etc. So I had an honest question of whether there is adequate supply of kind of semi-skilled people was my question actually. But anyway, you don't have to answer it necessarily, but whatever you want to comment on. Mr. Ranjan first and then Mr. Dwivedi.
No, I fully agree that skilling is required in a big way in Uttar Pradesh. And today the supply of skilled people to the required extent is not there, even though we have a skill development mission and a lot of work has been going on in that area, but not of the required, we have to identify what are the needs.
Yeah.
So what are the areas in which people need to be skilled. As you rightly pointed out, if you want to bring in a dairy revolution or a fisheries revolution, let us skill the people in that, where they can get employment, where they can get jobs, where they can become agri-entrepreneurs. So I think that kind of a mismatch is there, which has to be taken care of. Just one or two quick points. Yes, I'll repeat my thing that we have to develop rural growth centers. We have agro-processing hubs there. We have healthcare facilities there. We have education facilities there. And then we draw people away from the villages into this rural growth centers, move them from non-farm to farm occupations there. And that I think will be an answer in a huge state like Uttar Pradesh. And I agree with Ranjan Dwivedi, decentralization of administration is essential. Empowering people and decentralization of administration, if you want to deliver good public health and education also, it cannot be done in a state like UP by sitting in Lucknow only and handling a huge state like that. You have to decentralize, give powers to the local bodies, trust them and make them perform. And if they can do it, then there is only a village can control how a village school works. Only a village education committee, where comprising of people living in the village who are stakeholders, can know what is going on in a village school. Otherwise, in a 1.5 lakh schools, no secretary education sitting in Lucknow can understand what is going on, or he can possibly even monitor what is going on. That's what I wanted to say. And finally, about industrialization, I said there is a lot of opportunity in UP today because one, the expressway network has come. Second, we have the Eastern Freight Corridor, 57% going through UP, and Delhi-Mumbai Corridor, 14% going through UP. Along the sides of all this, there's massive scope for industrialization, which is possible. And with the Jewar Airport coming up, Professor Charan Singh, Noida, Greater Noida, I think we'll catch up on Gurgaon and maybe go ahead also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dwivedi, you want to add something before I take a...
Well, Dr. Virmani, just two small points. One, as you said, that we don't need explanations. You trust me. You trust the speaker, so I won't go into detail. First is that this whole issue of the language divide. I think one of the reasons why the southern states moved forward much better than the ones in the north was the control of English and the influence of English in development. Now, I'll just give you one example. I was in China. I was in WHO for a while, and I was in China with a doctor. He fell ill and he went to take some medicines. And they gave him a medicine with labels in Chinese. He said, like hell, I'm going to have this. So now, that gives a whole lot of explanation as to why healthcare is poor. If you do not deliver healthcare in the language of the people, then you don't expect people to really get cured and have a good health. That's one.
Mhm.
Well, I think I'll just stop here.
No, that's an interesting point which I have not heard before. I think very interesting. Yeah.
Basically the point is that unless formal work is carried out in the language of the people in a
Right.
proper way, you cannot expect freedom, you cannot expect good health, and you cannot expect development. It's very easy to do it. I mean, the more you computerize, backend can be any language, front end, it's very easy to toggle between languages. But then you have to have policymakers thinking on these lines.
Again, now
Software-
with the arrival of the internet, etc., and automatic translators, lot can be done. Yeah, that's a good point. I take note of it. Yeah,
that's huge argument. I don't want to get to that.
right. Okay, thank you. We are running out of time. There was a lady who had a hand up. I don't know where she's gone.
So myself, Dr. Kavita Balian.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So I just want to make one point related to in agriculture. There is a huge need of agro-based industries in UP. I have an example. There is a district Shamli in Western UP. The per capita income of Shamli is highest in UP, not only UP, even all India level, just because of there are number of agro-based industries in this district. In UP, we don't have much agro-based industries. If actually we want to increase farmers' income or farm household income, so we have to think about to develop the agro-based industries within the rural periphery. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. There's somebody whose name is appearing as economy who has raised hand. I don't know. Who is that? You want to ask a question? No, I don't know why the hand.
That I think is Professor Mehrotra, who had logged in from the economy name.
Okay, I don't know. The hand is raised. You can.
Professor Mehrotra, do you observation? He is left.
Okay, so I don't. Charan, were there any other questions?
One question I see on the chat box asking whether the income is deflated or not. Yes, I mentioned in my lecture also, it is real income deflated by the GSDP.
Yes, real income only, not
okay. Okay, we are past our extended time, so thank you to all the participants. I think it was useful. The idea of this seminar was to get ideas, to put them on the table and then think about them and maybe also do something about it. So I think by and large it's been quite useful. If gone over time,
excuse me, sir. Sorry to disturb you. I just wanted to add to some points. Is it okay?
I don't see you, so I don't know who you are, or I can't see you. Where are you?
Sir, my name is Pranjali. Is it not visible?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir, I was listening to everybody, and one of the things you said that we cannot bring politics and economics together, sir. I think there.
No, I didn't say that, but go ahead.
Yes, sir. I know we are trying to understand the economics of UP in isolation of politics, but sir, UP, the politics plays a bigger role in deciding what economics is. And one thing sir said, where we need to do, sir, the problem with UP is the UP people do not believe. They have a very big mindset. हमको पढ़ना है, हमको सरकारी job करना है. They don't want to get skilled. They have a in the people in my college also, they don't want the skills. They want to study UPSC and then crack it. So until we inculcate a sense psychologically in the people that unless you can skill, जरूरी नहीं है सरकारी नौकरी ही सब कुछ है, आप कुछ और भी कर सकते हैं. So till that change doesn't come, no initiative from the government can pass on to the people. And one more point which sir said, that the healthcare should be in the language of the people. So that is a very important point, because UP is largely still based working on superstitions. So they do not believe the Angrezi medicines. So unless that is in the language of the people, they will not understand. So sir, these were the things I just wanted to
Those
add.
2 points are very valid.
Okay.
Okay, thank you to the all the people who came to speak, and with that, let me hand it over to Dr. Charan Singh to conclude the proceedings.
I must thank all of you. As you know that the Foundation for Economic Growth and Welfare is a research-based policy advice NGO which has been set up just about 3 years ago. We make special efforts to ensure that on contemporary policy issues, we are able to garner thoughts and ignite a debate. It is in that very context that we have had a few Nobel laureates come and speak on our forum, as well as a good mix of domestic and international economic experts speak on this forum. Today's discussion continues that tradition. It is a very big issue. If India has to become a $5 trillion economy, obviously the biggest state in the country, UP, has also to become and progress rapidly. You are right. The government of UP had asked for a bid for $1 trillion, how to make UP a $1 trillion economy. The effort has been made in our forum today to bring to the officials in UP that there are enough thoughts within our country, experts within our country who can develop and help UP grow into a giant which it wants to. Actually, the whole of the country, all of us from UP and out of UP want UP to grow because UP is a reservoir of labor right now, unskilled as our chairman was mentioning, most of it. It's a reservoir of labor, and that is where we can draw upon. UP labor reaches everywhere across the country and is bringing in remittances. And if we can develop UP as another hub, if we can become Bangalore or Hyderabad into UP, or we can make Gurgaon into Noida and Greater Noida, we would have achieved a lot in terms of using the labor, increasing their income, and ensuring that UP as a state grows. I must mention that quality of today's discussion, as you would agree with me, was very high. We have tried to cover agriculture. We have tried to cover labor issues, social sector. We have had 2 practitioners, the best we could think of, to come and join and share their thoughts with us. Today's recording will be available to everybody by noon tomorrow. We would request you to let this word spread, let others hear about the thoughts that have been raised today in today's meeting by experts and policymakers in UP and out of UP. I would also like to make an announcement that next session is from an American professor, Bill Cowen. He will be speaking to us next Friday from 6 to 7:30. With this, let me once again thank our chairman, Dr. Virmani, to have chaired this session, and thank each of the panelists. At such a short notice, they agreed to be part of our panel. We wish to take this dialogue further. We wish Lucknow is able to listen to us, and policymakers in Lucknow are able to benefit from the discussion that we have had today. We'll be happy to continue this dialogue further and provide further inputs, granular as they are, as the chairman of our session today mentioned. For Mr. Parmod, Professor Parmod, we could do a detailed agriculture in UP session and discuss it further. We could also bring the 2 policymakers again and in detail discuss. And I think decentralization of power, empowering the local bodies is a great idea. And if the Panchayati Raj institutions can become strong, decentralization takes place automatically. We don't have to invent the wheel, and we'll be able to generate enough knowledge at the village level. The village level monitoring of education and public health improves. That takes care of both education and social sector. So I think we would like to continue with this dialogue for today. I want to thank each one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.